Hi everyone, welcome to this mini webinar that is being prepared for allied health support. My name is Natalie Jack. I am an allied health professional based in Melbourne in Australia, and I provide supervision to all health professionals. So supervision is my topic for the day, and supervision is something that, all health professionals we need to have a think about. So thanks for having me. Today what I'm going to be talking about is student supervision. So I'm going to be talking about the things that are the same as professional supervision, the things that might be a bit different to professional supervision, opportunities that we have when we supervise students that we can't necessarily have in professional supervision, and emerging practices in supervision. That one's an interesting one because I'm recording this in June 2020 and we're coming out hopefully the other side of the COVID-19 pandemic, and that pandemic has caused a lot of changes to have to happen in the clinical placement, student supervision kind of world. And so I'm going to tell you about some of the experiences I've had over the last few months in that area and what emerging practices that we might see ongoing in student supervision. So to start with, let me just introduce a little bit to myself. I don't want this to be all about me and my stuff, but my background is as a music therapist. So I'm a registered music therapist and I have been since '99. I also have a master's in mental health science, and so my clinical area of interest is mental health. I've done some supervision training with a bunch of different people, and supervision really is where I see my skills going forward. I do also do a small amount of clinical leadership in health service down here in Melbourne. I have a website if you want to get in contact with me at any time. It's just nataliejack.com, and you can ask me questions or get through to me that way. So in my profession as a music therapist, and I've supervised all kinds of different other health professionals, I've really paid attention a lot to student supervision. I've done a lot of student supervision for Melbourne University, which is where our music therapists come from down here in Melbourne. And I've had a lot of time, I guess, to think about and talk to other music therapists about their supervision of students. So the first topic is what kind of things are the same in professional and in student supervision. And some of the things that we can do that are really similar are we can not just give all the answers to the students, we can help them to find their own solutions, which is absolutely what we do in our professional supervision. You know, when I sit down with a professional, allied health professional, I don't sit there and say, oh, well, you can just go do this and this and this and that will solve all your problems. That's not what supervision is about. Supervision is about hearing and listening to people's issues and concerns and helping them, facilitating them to find their own solutions. And we can start that process with students. A lot of the time students are graduate students, and I know certainly music therapy, all of our students are master's students nowadays. So we have graduate students. They're not beginners, they're not first year undergrads. They have the capacity to solve a lot of their own issues. And so we can point them in the direction, we can give them suggestions, but ultimately what we want to be doing is enforcing that idea in students that they can be powerful and empowered to find solutions for their own problems. So that's the first thing that's really similar to the ideas of professional supervision. The second thing that's really similar to professional supervision is that we want our students to be self-led in supervision. So we don't necessarily want the student to come into supervision and for me, the supervisor, to have a great long list of things we need to talk about. What I want to do is to train those future mental health or allied health professionals they need to use the supervision the way they are going to go forward. So I encourage all my students to make an agenda. They bring to me the things they want to talk about. So, perhaps there was a client interaction they wanted to talk about, or perhaps there was a professional interaction they wanted to think about, or whatever it is, but they make an agenda and they bring it to me exactly the way I do with professional supervision. Of course, in the context of university studies and being students, I will perhaps as the supervisor have a list of things I need to do or ask with the student, but I always encourage the student to bring their list, their agenda to supervision, because as a professional, that's how we do it. The other things that are very, very similar, in fact the same as a professional supervision, are the fact that we're supporting the students, we're validating the students, and we're also challenging the students. We want students to feel supported and validated. We want to hear them. We want to say, yes, you're doing a great job. We want to validate their concerns. We want to do all those things, but we also want to challenge our students. We want to challenge them in that safe space that is the clinical supervision space. If I have a student that has an issue or a problem or a really big thing go down, I'd rather it happen while they're on placement with me, because they have that really good support of myself and of the university. So we want to challenge our students. We don't want to coddle them. We want to send them, go and work with a difficult patient, work with these people, work in this community, work in these places where you can bring those things to me and you're getting that really good support and supervision. So that's really important, is to challenge those students in the clinical settings. Also, I think what's important, and the same as professional supervision, is challenging them in the supervision. You've got to gauge how they're feeling and ask them, are you ready for a challenge today? But I will say to students, why did you choose that song? Why did you choose that intervention? Why did you say that to that patient? Why did you choose that location to do that session? Why? Because if we don't know why we're doing something, that's a problem. So I will absolutely challenge my students on all of their decisions every now and again, just to see where they're at, what their clinical process of thinking is, what their mindset is like, and why they're doing things. Because if they don't know why they're doing something, there's definitely a problem. Because as we know, as health professionals, all the things we do are intentional. Everything we do is intentional, and the end goal is to meet the need of a patient. If we don't know why we're doing something, we need to look into that. So supporting and validating and challenging, those are the three things that really work well with students and professionals. So there's a lot of aspects of student supervision that are the same as professional supervision. All right, so on to the next topic, briefly, of things that are different in student supervision. And clearly there are lots of different things in student supervision. We do a lot more teaching. We do a lot more correcting. We do a lot of, oh, by the way, this technique is really good in this situation. And actually, I saw you do this particular thing. It could have been better if you'd done it this other way. So, this is where this placement and supervision in a clinical space, this is where our students learn to be clinicians. It's not in the classroom at university. That's where they learn the theory. They learn to be clinicians with you in the supervision, in the clinical space. So we need to do a lot of this teaching. We need to do a lot of explaining and suggesting, and here, how about this, and how about this, and how about this. This is where they learn the actual real life part about being a health professional. So that's really important. We can also, more so than professionals, we can assign tasks. So we can say to them, look, I want you to look up 10 articles and copy them and put them in a folder for the next student to look at. Let's create a collection of literature. I want you to, provide an in-service. I want you to write an in-service about the service that we provide for this particular group of staff members. So we can assign tasks to students to help them further their professional development as students, because as soon as they get into that professional role, they're going to have to do those types of things. So I would really encourage you, if you're supervising students and if the university is okay with that, it's part of their kind of structure, to give the students tasks, get them to do some of those real professional things like giving in-services, talking to a group of staff members, because they're the things that as professionals, if you've never done that as a student and have had no guidance or practice in it, it can be really daunting and really scary for a new grad, especially to walk into that professional education kind of realm. And of course, we give feedback. We give a lot more feedback when we're doing student supervision as to when we're doing professional supervision. We are saying, oh, I observed this particular session with this patient and I need to give you some feedback. So there's that real element of teaching and learning and giving feedback. And look, giving feedback is another whole webinar. Giving feedback, especially difficult feedback or negative feedback, that's another whole skill set that we need to have as supervisors. It can be really difficult to give negative feedback. So, maybe that's a topic for another webinar one day, but giving really clear feedback with positive suggestions on how to improve is a really important part of supervising students, because that's the crux of what they need to do. They need to do the work, get the feedback, and then do better next time. So that's really important, giving that feedback. And the last part that is really also very, very important in student supervision is answering questions. And just sometimes all the students need is just to be given the answer, because they're new, they're learning, and sometimes they just don't know. That's why they're learning. So a lot of the time, yes, they can find their own solutions to things, but sometimes you just need to give them information. And that's good too, because you have a wealth of clinical information and experience and wisdom from all your years of being a health professional. We can pass that on. We can do those types of things for students to say, yep, this is what I do. And encourage them. Bring the questions. Bring your questions with your agenda. I'm happy to answer anything. And, being transparent about your own practice and being able to articulate why you do certain things is actually really good for your own practice as well. I love when I have a student who comes and asks me, why do we do this? Or why did you do that if they were observing me in a session? Why did you do that particular thing? Or why did you use that technique? Or why did you say that? And I have to really think about my own practice. And that can only make me better as a clinician. So it's really important to answer questions from students openly and honestly, in my opinion, and help them to understand the wheres and wherefores of all the different nuances of what it means to be a health professional. We just have to give information. Sometimes you need to say, here's a website, go look at that. And that can just help them to, be able to go, right, I'll look at that later. And right now I can focus on my clinical work. So sometimes we do just need to feed information to students because they just need a bit of a hand of where to look. So it's a bit of a balance, as you can see, being able to encourage the students to find their own resources and find their own solutions to things. But also some days they just need, here you go, here's a great thing that I've learned, or here's a great resource for you to go and look at it, and off you go. All of these things will also, obviously, they will depend on what the university's requirements are. If it's anything like Melbourne Uni, they've got a manual that says this is what the role of the supervisor is, this is what the role of the student is, and there are all those kinds of guidelines. So, of course, the caveat here is you need to do what is appropriate within the university context, within their rules and guidelines. And hopefully, if there's something not clear, you can have someone to contact at the university to say, hey, I want to do this thing with a student. Is that cool? And you can have that information. And occasionally you do have a student who is struggling, and that's part of life. Not all of our students are strong, A students, and some of them really struggle. And I know that will depend also on the kind of setting you work in. If you work in a special school, or if you work in a hospital with some, regular kind of run-of-the-mill patients and things where things aren't really all that stressful, things could be fine. A lot of my work I've done in mental health and forensics, so it's been a high secure situation. And that type of situation can bring up a lot of things for students. And so when your students struggle, you really need to then step up your game as a supervisor to know how to help them. If they're struggling in the clinical environment, if they're struggling with a particular patient, then you're talking about things like transference and countertransference, and you're talking about self-care and how to look after yourself. How do we continue this placement when there are struggles and difficulties? And again, perhaps that's another whole webinar to be talking about the tricky students, the ones that are not coping so well. And I've certainly had my share of those. One of the boundaries, very quickly before I move on, one of those boundaries we need to have as supervisors, and this is in any context, professional or student, is when to know when the student's issue is personal and when to know it's professional. Now, every supervisor will have their own line there, and that's an individual thing. But my take on it is any topic that's impacting your ability to work, we can talk about. So I've had, as an example, supervisees, student supervisees, and professional supervisees who've had difficulties in their personal life, say a breakup, it's a common one. And they come to work and they're not doing well, and they're obviously distracted and things aren't going well. And I say, what's happening? Are you okay? And they say, oh, look, I know I shouldn't talk to you about it, but I'm going through this personal thing. And I say to them, no, hang on a second. That personal thing, I can't help you with the details of that personal thing, and I really suggest that you get some counselling or what have you. But let's talk about how it's affecting your work, because you know what? If that thing is affecting your work, I need to know about it. I can tell, I can look at you, I can see that you're not on your game. So that's where my line is. My line is any topic that's affecting your work, we talk about it in that context. When it goes into, I'm not helping you solve your problems of your personal life, your issues or whatever you're going through, but when that issue is present at work, and of course it is, we're human beings, we can't separate out ourselves into personal and professional, then it's fair game to talk about. So in supervision, we talk about how does this affect us? How does this event in world history affect us? How, what does this professional interaction I had with another staff member, how is that affecting us? What about this business practice? How does this work? What about this clinical thing? So for me, I have a very broad definition of supervision. It's anything that affects your work, whether it's clinical work with a patient, professional issue with a staff member, a business type of issue. If you're someone who has a business, this is more professional, obviously. Any of those things are fair game for supervision. And personal stuff, where it affects and what we can do to kind of put a boundary around that for you, and how we can help you to get your work done effectively while you're managing that other personal stuff there. What is not normally a supervision thing with professionals can be with students. And now I'm talking about this operational stuff. We tend to call it operational nowadays. So things like in the workplace, supervision does not encompass, your pay slip or your hours, or unless that's affecting your work, then there's that grey area, or any of that kind of operational stuff that's to do with the system and the organization. That's another meeting. That's not what we do supervision for. Supervision is for the person, it's themselves in their work. It's not for that admin-y kind of stuff. However, with students, we do need to bring a little bit of that operational stuff into it, because they have requirements for uni. We have to maybe sign off on something, or we have to, do their hours or get those types of things done. So quite often I do include supervision, in supervision for students, some of those operational type of things, again, because there are requirements from the organisation, which is the university, that need to be attended to. But I really, as much as possible, will try to have separate meeting times for supervision. So that's a contained thing, and that is for the student, for the supervisee, for them to bring their things. And then another time, a quick half an hour, another day, to deal with operational stuff, because that is not supervision. Okay, so that's another kind of balancing act between professional and student supervision there. So I talked about earlier that I wanted to say something about the opportunities we have in supervision, and I touched on it earlier. One of the things is, this is where students actually learn to be whatever it is, an occupational therapist, an allied health assistant, a physio, a music therapist, all of those things. This is where they get to be it and see it and actually do it. So the supervision in clinical placements is such an important part of their learning and of their career. So we have a really, really good opportunity, really important opportunity as student supervisors, to be able to show what it's like, the good stuff, the bad stuff, to be completely transparent about, this is how it is in this particular setting. So I really encourage student supervisors to allow the students to have that experience, allow them to, as I said, take the tricky client or do the advanced technique with your supervision, because this is where they get to try it. And if they can do that and try it in a supported environment of supervision, they're much more likely to be confident to be able to go out and be good, creative therapists who can use a range of techniques, who've been exposed to a range of different clinical ideas and different people and different staff members and those types of things. Encourage them to talk to family members if that's part of your practice, and liaise with people. Encourage them to do that, go to that meeting or do that in service, because that's where they learn that nitty-gritty every day of being a clinician. Really, really important opportunity we have as supervisors to allow them to experience the whole range of being a clinician, not just that small part, which is the clinical service, the time with the client. Also, it's a good time because I'm bonkers about supervision, it's a really good time to teach the students how to use supervision effectively. And this is not just rocking up to the supervision 10 minutes late, not being prepared, allowing the supervisor to kind of do their own agenda. It's no, this is protected time. This is important for my professional development. This is important for a long life in my career. I'm going to take the time to sit ahead of time and prepare my agenda. So when I walk into that supervision session on time, I'm going to make the most of this opportunity that I'm given to me. So that's been given to me, sorry. So teaching students how to make the most out of supervision, to really just milk everything they possibly can out of that supervision experience so that they can learn as much as they possibly can. And hopefully those skills will transfer into their professional career when they learn to seek out good supervision and to really use supervision as well as they can to get the most out of it. I talk about supervision being like insurance almost for your career. If you're paying the money and spending the time and the effort on good quality supervision, that will help you to have a better, more positive experience in your work, and it will actually help you to stay in your workplace or your job or your career longer because you're getting the support you need. So I see student supervision as a really, really fantastic opportunity to teach future clinicians how to use supervision, how to benefit from it the most they possibly can. The other thing that we can really use as an opportunity in student supervision is to help students start to find and formulate their own professional identity as a therapist, as a nurse, as a doctor, as a health professional. Now, I recall when I was a student many years ago, over 20 years ago now, some of the supervisors and lecturers and professionals that I saw in the industry, I could identify with. And I could go, oh, I can kind of see myself doing that work in that way that that professional is showing me. And some other professionals I was exposed to, I felt not a disconnect, but I didn't feel that really that I could do that work. I kind of thought, oh, okay, that's really awesome, or it's different or whatever, but I couldn't imagine myself in that position. So what it is really important for students is to be exposed to different types of clinicians, different types of therapists or nurses or doctors or whoever we're talking about, so that they can go, oh, I like the way they did that. I'm going to do that and remember that. Or oh, I don't think I could do that way. I would do it differently and I'll leave that. So what I encourage my students to do is never ever to try to just be like me or be like another supervisor. That's not going to help anyone. Take the pieces that you see from different clinicians and build that into your own professional identity. Because we're all different. I've had different life experiences. Every student has had a different life experience. Every clinician is unique in their own way that they work. So it's not really fair to say to a student, do it like me. Do that thing like me and do all of these things just like I'm doing. It's just not fair because they're not me. So I always say to them, look, you take it or leave it, and you argue with me. Argue with me about why did you do that? I don't think I could do that. And I will absolutely happily have a conversation with you about this is my strength or this is the way I've learned or whatever. Let's talk about how you might want to do it in your own way. And yes, there are standard things that have to be done in healthcare and we all have to abide by that, but every one of us is unique in our identity and in our strengths. You might be better doing, physical-based activities. You might be better doing psychological-based activities. You might be better, in your knowledge and your skills and your background doing all kinds of things differently. So I always encourage students, try to think about who you are as a therapist. Don't try to imitate me or any other therapist. Look at the things you've seen and take from each experience what you believe will be useful to you, and that will change as you grow and as you do more things as a clinician, and start building that unique identity of who you are as a therapist. In the long run, you will be much more comfortable and confident in your abilities if you're not just trying to replicate somebody else's exact way of being. And you might want to do that. I might do a technique that you just think, great, this is awesome, I'm going to do it exactly like that. And that might work for you, but not everything I do is going to work for every single student. So I, within the bounds of obviously what they need to learn for university, I really encourage students to find out who they are. What is your identity as a therapist? And most of them have never even thought about that before. They're just kind of, students are so diligent. They just want to do the right thing and get the marks and do it. And I try to say to them, look, I know you're going to pass. It's okay. Let's see who you are as a therapist and let's get the most out of this experience. So there we have, I think we really have lots of fantastic opportunities to educate and really lift up the workforce in our student supervision. It's an important role as a supervisor, and it's one that, we all take seriously as supervisors in those clinical roles. And it's really worth kind of, doing some training and sitting down with someone and thinking about how are you as a supervisor too. And I mean, that's another whole webinar as well. But what is my role as a supervisor? What techniques do I enjoy using? What do I, and it's my job to do different things with different supervisees because they all need something slightly different. That's kind of, that's supervision training. But it's a really important role. So if you'd like to learn more about supervision, there's obviously so many resources. The person that I always say to go and read up on first is Dr. Michael Carroll. He's he's retired now, but he's a UK specialist in supervision, and I've done his trainings, and his trainings were fantastic, and I really related to what he was saying and the way he did supervision, and so I use a lot of his ideas and techniques. And so any of the books by Dr. Michael Carroll are great. There's one in particular for starting out to be either a supervisor or a supervisee that I recommend by Michael. I'm trying to think if I have it here to show you. Oh, yes, I do. Excuse me. It's here. No, that's not it. It's this one. All right, it's called On Being a Supervisee. This is the first edition. There's another edition as well. I don't know if you can still get it anywhere, but have a look for it. It's creating learning partnerships. Now it's aimed for at supervisees, like I was saying before about how to get the most out of supervision. Like this is what you should expect from supervision. This is how you can use it to support yourself. But at the same time, if you're a supervisor, if you read this, it will help you in the opposite way. What to give to my supervisees? What should supervisees get from a good, high quality supervisor? So this is my number one recommendation on being a supervisee, Creating Learning Partnerships by Michael Carroll and Maria Gilbert. Fantastic book. So have a look, see if you can still get it. I know the publishers are not doing a lot of this kind of publishing anymore. The second edition is more a different color too. It's orange on the front, orange and gray. So have a look for it if you're interested. So yeah, just very quickly in the final few minutes, I just want to talk about how things changed very quickly in March this year at the beginning of the COVID-19 pandemic for us. All of a sudden people went, we can't have students. Hospitals, schools, health services all over the place said we can't have students, you've got to stop. And then of course universities had to respond to that. How do they help their students continue their education and get the hours and the clinical experience they need? Because if we all of a sudden have a stop in our student flow through, we're going to have a workforce problem. In health, we're going to have a massive workforce problem. We're going to have a whole year almost. If we just said, right, no placements for a year, we're going to have a problem because we're not going to have a whole year of recruits to bring in to the health profession. So it's actually a workforce issue to keep students in their placement. And so what happened at Melbourne University that I've been doing some work with is they very, very quickly put together a subject called Introduction to Clinical Placements. And they worked with our national body who accredits our new graduates and said, look, we can't do in-person placements. Let's work together to decide how students can access that in a creative way online. And so they did that. And I think they did a very, very good job in a very short period of time. So the national body and the university came together very quickly and agreed that, okay, this is how this subject would work. Students would be allowed to accrue hours for these types of activities, and this is how they would be assessed on that, and this is how they would teach that. So what I've been involved with is online introduction to placement, and it's been an amazing experience. We've done things like have a 2-hour group supervision session each week with our students. We have done pre-recorded case study videos and uploaded it to the learning system, and we've provided tasks for those students to complete based on the case studies. So one of the positives is the students have had access to see so many different practitioners. They wouldn't normally do that. If they came with me on placement, they'd get to see me and maybe 1 or 2 others in the team. But this time they've actually been able to see the clinical work of 6 different music therapists. So that's been really good. And because we've got this technology of online learning and interacting, we've been able to share practical skills, demonstrate the singing of this song or this particular improvisation or those types of things. So, all credit to the people that organised this setup, because what it has meant is that students have still had a placement-like opportunity to continue their studies. And look, it hasn't been easy. They've had to do all their subjects at home and then this clinical subject as well. So the students have had, massive learning curve, as we have as supervisors as well, doing everything online, learning the online systems and things like that. But I think overall it's been an outstanding way to keep these things going during the pandemic and all the restrictions that we've had. And it's been fantastic, and I've been able to see more students than I normally would have in that period of time, because we've been able to do it in a group situation, and the university has supplied, all the online technology for that. It's been fantastic. So I guess the last thing is, what questions does this leave us for now, hopefully, that we're coming out the other side of the pandemic? What types of these creative, unusual, maybe online services can we continue on where maybe we don't have enough placement supervisors, or a student lives in a remote place and can't access a music therapist or another type of clinician to do that clinical work? How can these online alternatives maybe become part of our teaching methods and our clinical placements going forward? Now, I know universities are delivering whole whole degrees online. I did my master's online. And so that's not new, but clinical placement, how do you do that online? How do we create an environment where people can really learn the skills? Not all the time, perhaps just part of it. How can we do that online? And I think this has been a really nice, I guess, dipping our toe in the water of how can we look into the future to do that as potentially part of clinical experiences for people to make things easier or better or even doable in some cases, like being remote or what have you. So yeah, I think out of this difficult situation of the pandemic, we're going to have some really lovely creative ways emerge in the future to hopefully be continued on in some form to increase the ability for people to learn, to access education, and to have the best possible support through supervision. So for me, it's been a fantastic experience, really positive to see the creativity and the awesome things that people have been able to put together in a really short period of time. So that's it for today. Look, I know it's gone a bit quickly and it's a very short kind of snapshot of what supervision is for students. And again, that's a whole, it's got a whole training course really in student supervision. But I hope that's been useful perhaps just to get you thinking about how your supervision is with students, how your practices could change, maybe what you'd like to do in future to read up or get some more training or to think about different ways of doing your supervision with your students in your clinical practice. So yeah, thank you for watching. My name's Natalie, and yeah, you can get a hold of me if you need to via the Allied Health Support or at my website nataliejack.com. And I look forward to seeing you again another day. Thanks. Bye.